Imagine standing in absolute pitch black darkness. Like you are inside this decaying, totally forgotten building, and it is 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, that is already a nightmare scenario.
Right, and the air in this place is incredibly thick. It's almost stagnant. There is this suffocating quality to the atmosphere that you can, like, physically feel pressing against your skin.
Well, and it creates this specific type of atmospheric pressure, right?
Yeah.
It actually causes the tympanic membrane in your ear to react. That's why you get that low, persistent ringing in completely silent, isolated places.
Yeah, exactly.
It is a primal evolutionary instinct firing off in the oldest part of the human brain, just alerting you to a major shift in your environment.
And the only sound in the entire world is this low, rumbling bass tone of a bitter wind pressing against a cracked window pane. Or maybe, there is the rhythmic patter of rain outside. You truly believe you are completely alone.
But you're not.
No. Because cutting through that dead silence, there is a distinct mechanical click. A blinking red light just pierces the void, indicating that an invisible electromagnetic field has just spiked violently right in the center of this empty room.
Oh, wow.
And right beside it, you hear the soft hiss of a digital tape recorder capturing audio frequencies that your human ears simply cannot perceive.
That is deeply unsettling.
It really is. So welcome to The Learner. We are incredibly glad you are joining us today because if you are listening to this, you are stepping into a highly unique, intensely suspense-filled edition of our show.
Yeah, this one is definitely different.
But I want to set the parameters for you immediately. This is not some collection of cheap campfire jump scares or
Yeah.
urban legends. We are plunging into a meticulous 13-year scientific, technological, and honestly deeply psychological exploration into the absolute limits of human perception.
We really are. We are unpacking a newly published, just extraordinary logbook titled Uncharted Realms, documenting the paranormal. It was released by Shadow Figure Publishing, and the author is Bill Hyland.
Right. And just to keep things smooth today, to maintain our focus throughout this massive deep dive, we are going to refer to the author simply as Bill.
Good call. And alongside his book, we are scrutinizing this fascinating supplementary scientific document he provided. It's simply titled The Battery Drain Experiment.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the way Bill approaches the unknown is really what elevates this material from just ghost stories into a verifiable, strict study of environmental anomalies.
Right, he isn't just the guy with a flashlight looking for a thrill.
Exactly. He volunteers to sit in these freezing, isolated environments while the rest of the world is asleep, but he isn't doing it just to be frightened. He writes about finding this intense, almost magnetic joy in stepping into mysteries that lie just out of reach of our current understanding of physics.
I love that about his approach.
He brings this very delicate, intentional mix of rigid, unforgiving logic and raw human intuition.
That duality really is the entire foundation of his methodology. I mean, he treats these environments as active crime scenes of the unknown.
Crime scenes, yeah.
He walks in loaded with professional-grade technology, but he refuses to let the gadgets blind him to the human element. He acts as a buffer, really, between terrified everyday people and the phenomena they are experiencing.
Right, he brings an analytical framework to their panic. He's attempting to map the very edge of what modern science can actually measure. And then, he dares us to look at what lies a fraction of an inch beyond that boundary.
And before we even get into the truly terrifying locations he visits, and there are many, we need to understand how he validates his entire process.
Yes, the methodology is everything here.
He didn't just walk into a graveyard with a camera and hope to catch a shadow. He demanded a controlled, totally repeatable experiment to prove that something anomalous was actively manipulating the physical environment.
So let's look at that supplementary PDF, the battery drain experiment. Because for decades, right, the paranormal community has operated on this hypothesis that entities or unseen energies drain batteries to draw the power they need to manifest.
It's a huge trope in the field.
Exactly. But Bill wanted to see if that was just folklore or if it was measurable science.
So he designed this brilliant, totally self-contained testing apparatus. He wired a 2.4-volt DC 900 milliamp flashlight bulb with positive and negative leads, connecting it directly to a battery holder.
Okay, pretty straightforward.
Yeah, but then he purchased a brand new, factory-sealed 16-count pack of Duracell AAA batteries, specifically the ones equipped with Duralock technology.
To make sure there were no dud batteries.
Exactly. And to completely eliminate human error, he connected a highly calibrated digital multimeter to measure the exact voltage discharge down to the decimal. Plus, He set up an HD video camera to log the visual data points every 3 minutes until the batteries were chemically exhausted.
The sheer rigor of this setup is what makes the results so incredibly compelling. So he establishes part one, the control variable.
Right.
He runs the entire test in his own home. This is a location with zero reported historical anomalies or paranormal activity, and he plots the voltage drainage on this comprehensive graph.
And what did the control graph look like?
Well, according to the strict laws of chemistry and physics, the battery drainage was perfectly consistent. It formed this smooth, highly predictable downward curve until about the 85-minute mark.
Right. At which point the voltage just dropped off a cliff because the chemical reaction inside the alkaline batteries finally exhausted itself. That's exactly how batteries are supposed to work.
Exactly. So then he takes the exact same apparatus, the same multimeter, the same bulb, and fresh batteries from that exact same unopened 16-count pack, and he runs part two, the variable test.
And he does this at the Hoffman Cemetery.
Yes, a notoriously active historical location. And he documents the environmental variables so rigorously. The control test at his home was conducted at 69 degrees Fahrenheit with 61% humidity.
Okay.
The cemetery test was 86 degrees Fahrenheit with 79% humidity. Now, standard battery chemistry dictates that higher temperatures can slightly accelerate discharge rates.
Right. Heat makes batteries drain a bit faster. That's just basic science.
But the data he captured goes far beyond a slight temperature variance. The batteries at the cemetery drained an astonishing 23% faster than the control group.
Wait, 23% just from sitting in a cemetery?
Yes. And it wasn't a smooth, accelerated curve either. Each pair of batteries he tested at the cemetery drained at completely erratic, unpredictable paces. The grash didn't look like a curve at all. It looked like a jagged mountain range.
Wow. A 23% variance with highly erratic discharge curves. You simply cannot explain that away with an increase in ambient summer heat. It strongly suggests an external invisible force actively pulling power from the electrical circuit.
It really does.
It proves this concept known as environmental displacement.
The analogy that came to mind for me when I was reading through this data is that investigating these anomalies is essentially like trying to measure the wind.
Oh, I like that.
Because you cannot actually see the wind itself, right? The gases making up our atmosphere are entirely invisible to the naked human eye. If you want to prove the wind exists to someone who has literally never felt it, you have to measure how it affects the physical world around it.
You measure the displacement.
Exactly. You observe the leaves violently rustling on the branches, or you log the sudden drop in ambient temperature as a weather front moves in. In Bill's investigations, the wind is whatever invisible force is actively consuming 23% of his battery's voltage.
That makes perfect sense.
He isn't claiming to have captured the entity itself in a jar. He is measuring the literal footprint the anomaly leaves behind as it moves through our physical space.
And that framing is really essential for the rest of his 13-year logbook. Bill operates as a forensic investigator documenting atmospheric displacement.
But what makes his narrative so compelling is that he didn't start out with this level of clinical detachment.
Not at all.
Before he was a seasoned veteran conducting chemical battery drain experiments, he was this incredibly anxious novice. His very first outing was a profound baptism by fire.
So we jump back to April 2nd, 2011. He is visiting Bender's Burial Grounds, which is also historically documented as the Maytown Bender Cemetery in Warrington Township, Pennsylvania.
Picture the environment here. It is a crisp spring night. He arrives around 11 o'clock, and the isolation is absolute.
Just crickets echoing in the tall grass.
Yes, and every step he takes produces this loud, snapping crunch of dead leaves. He is entirely alone in this historic cemetery, miles from any modern infrastructure. And by his own humble admission in the book, he has absolutely no idea what he is actually doing.
His methodology at this early stage is so rudimentary.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he is armed with basic consumer-grade gear and an overwhelming sense of vulnerability.
Just flying by the seat of his pants.
Completely. His entire frame of reference for how to conduct an investigation is cobbled together from observing reality television shows. He is standing in the dark, clicking buttons on audio recorders, genuinely hoping something will happen, while simultaneously terrified that something actually might.
It's that classic fear of the unknown. So he places his laptop on a makeshift surface. He has an audio software program running alongside a handheld digital voice recorder. And he's standing there feeling the deep awkwardness of just talking out loud to himself in an empty graveyard.
Which is always weird the first time you do it.
Very weird. Suddenly, his laptop fan begins to run incredibly erratically. It isn't a normal cooling hum at all. It starts buzzing violently, sounding almost as if someone poured coarse sand directly into the internal motor.
Oh, that's not good.
Right. So, seeking a cause, he asks a question out into the dark. He says, "Did you do that to my computer?"
But then he catches himself.
He immediately second guesses himself, reasoning that a consciousness from the 1800s wouldn't comprehend the word computer, so he corrects himself and asks, "Did you do that to my box?"
And standing there in the physical environment, he hears absolutely nothing in response, just the ambient noise of the woods. The realization of what occurred doesn't actually happen until the following afternoon.
Right. He's back home.
He is sitting in the bright, comforting safety of his living room.
Mm.
His wife is just reading a book nearby. The contrast between the terrifying isolation of the cemetery and the mundane safety of his home is so stark.
He is wearing headphones, meticulously scrubbing through hours of what seems to be totally dead air.
And then he reaches the timestamp where the laptop fan begins its violent buzzing.
He hears his own recorded voice ask, "Did you do that to my box?" And then clear as a bell, cut right through the static, a voice replies. It says, "I did it."
So
He captured his very first EVP, an electronic voice phenomenon, but the validation is absolute because he immediately checks his secondary device, the video camera capturing the scene.
and on the video's separate audio track.
At the exact same timestamp, that identical voice says, "I did it."
That cross-verified audio capture serves as the ultimate catalyst for his entire career. It provided the precise amount of validation required to push him past his initial fear.
He realized the phenomena was genuinely interacting with him.
Exactly, which meant his approach needed to evolve from amateur thrill-seeking into highly structured data collection.
And this evolution brings us to a much more complex, heavily scrutinized investigation later that same year at Sachs-Covered Bridge in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Now, Gettysburg is a location with staggering historical weight.
Oh, absolutely. The sheer volume of trauma and loss associated with that soil creates a totally unique environmental density.
Sachs Bridge carries its own grim subset of Civil War lore. Historical accounts suggest it is the site where 3 Confederate soldiers were summarily hanged, either for desertion or espionage, and their bodies were left as a brutal warning to others.
It's an architectural structure completely steeped in finality and suffering.
So Bill decides to test a totally new technological approach here. He deploys an infrared video camera, but he programs it to shoot at exactly 29 frames per second.
Okay.
And he pairs this with a strobe light calibrated to flash exactly 29 times per second.
Oh, that's incredibly clever.
Right. By syncing them, every single frame of video receives its own distinct, isolated flash of illumination. He intentionally only records for about 10 seconds, knowing that he will have to manually, painstakingly review 290 individual frames of footage.
This is a highly meticulous form of visual data collection designed specifically to eliminate ambiguity. By utilizing a synchronized strobe, he removes motion blur entirely.
It isolates split-second kinetic anomalies that the human eye could never process in real time.
So what does he find when he scrubs through the footage?
Well, he is sitting in his lab looking at the frames. Frame 139 shows absolutely nothing, just the wooden trusses of the bridge structure illuminated by the infrared flash.
Okay, totally normal.
But frame 140 captures something staggering. In the lower right corner of the frame, occupying a substantial amount of space, is a huge headless figure standing clearly in the light.
A headless figure.
Yes, and then he advances to frame 141, and the figure is completely gone.
When we break down the physics required for that capture, it just completely shatters our understanding of biological motion.
Break that down for us.
Well, the camera's recording at 29 frames per second. For a physical human being to move into the frame, completely halt their forward momentum to avoid leaving any motion blur.
Right, because of the strobe sync.
Exactly. Be captured perfectly still in a single isolated frame and then physically accelerate completely out of the frame before the next 129th of a second flash. I mean, it is a physical, mathematical impossibility.
The speed required is insane.
The kinetic energy required to accelerate and decelerate a biological mass of that size in less than 40 milliseconds would literally destroy the human body. The technology isolated a kinetic manifestation that completely defies earthly physics.
It is deeply unsettling when mathematics and physics prove that your eyes aren't playing tricks on you, that the anomaly is objectively real.
Very unsettling.
But capturing a split-second visual anomaly tied to a historic bridge is one thing. It is an entirely different level of psychological terror when the anomaly stops being tied to the location and starts following you home.
Oh, this part of the book is terrifying.
It really is. This brings us to an incredible sequence in the logbook concerning an impossible acoustic fingerprint.
To understand the profound gravity of this sequence, we have to define how environmental phenomena traditionally operate within parapsychology.
Okay, set the baseline.
By definition, a haunting or a residual anomaly is localized. It is tethered to the specific architecture, the geological magnetism of the Earth, or the historical tragedy of a fixed physical space. It simply does not travel.
So, Bill is investigating a refurbished two-story barn at a bed and breakfast in Gettysburg. He is working alongside a team of seasoned investigators, including two women named Nora and Ivana. To access the second floor of this massive barn, you have to walk up a large external earthen ramp. Bill leads the way, arriving at the top maybe 15 to 20 seconds ahead of the rest of the group. He is standing completely alone in this sprawling, totally empty upper level.
Okay, setting the scene.
Ivana eventually comes up the ramp behind him, holding her digital voice recorder out. She projects her voice into the empty space, calling out a long, drawn-out, "Hello!"
From Ivana's perspective, her naked ears hear absolutely nothing but the natural acoustic echo of her own voice bouncing off the wooden walls.
But Bill stops dead in his tracks.
He hears something.
Yes. With his own physical ears, without the aid of headphones or amplifiers, he clearly hears a disembodied voice reply directly to her. The voice speaks two distinct words.
Over here.
Bill notes in his logs that he possesses a unique physiological quirk. He has a hypersensitivity to acoustic anomalies. He frequently perceives auditory shifts in the environment that people standing right next to him completely miss, which is a wild trait to have in his line of work. So he mentally logs the timestamp of the event. But the profound shock occurs days later during his audio analysis.
And the shock isn't just that the voice successfully imprinted on the digital recorder.
No.
What's fascinating here is the linguistic and acoustic fingerprint of the voice itself. When Bill runs the audio forensics, really breaking down the waveform, he realizes with mounting dread that the precise timbre, the specific cadence, and the highly distinct Austrian accent of the voice are utterly identical to an EVP he had captured years prior.
Let that sink in. He had captured this exact, identical Austrian voice saying the exact same phrase over here when he was investigating completely alone in the dark at the Hoffman Gunpowder Burial Grounds down in Maryland.
And that location is 20 miles away from the Gettysburg barn.
Which completely shatters the foundational baseline assumptions of localized environmental haunting.
Exactly. If an acoustic signature perfectly matches across a 20-mile geographical gap, it suggests deliberate intent.
Intent, yeah. That's a scary word.
It implies that a concentration of conscious energy is not bound to the physical architecture of a location, but is instead tethering itself directly to the investigator. It forces the investigative team to confront the parapsychological hypothesis of an attachment.
And the concept of an attachment is deeply horrifying. It implies an invisible consciousness riding in the passenger seat of your car, just observing you.
And the geographic escalation doesn't stop at 20 miles.
No, it doesn't. Almost a year later, Bill is investigating the Palmyra Museum in upstate New York. This location is a staggering 231 miles away from the original burial grounds in Maryland.
That is a massive distance.
The team is conducting a completely mundane, fully illuminated daytime walkthrough of the building. And that same familiar Austrian voice makes its presence known on his recording equipment for a third time.
Bill, maintaining his rigid analytical framework, notes the statistical impossibility in his logs. He writes a very telling phrase. 2 times is a coincidence, but 3 times is a pattern.
The pattern solidifies unbelievably during a fourth incident in a completely contrasting environment. They are in Red Lion, Pennsylvania, investigating a modern, holistic beauty salon.
So there are no dusty bricks, no tragic battlefield history here.
Just a modern, well-lit salon. Someone on the investigative team jokingly asks a meta question about the paranormal television industry. They ask the room, "Do you think those TV shows ever go an entire night without finding any evidence?"
And almost instantaneously, the invisible voice replies in the audio recorder. Over here.
At this critical juncture, the scientific method Bill adheres to demands an external, unbiased consultation. The compiled data overwhelmingly points to a targeted, intelligent attachment actively following him across state lines.
So he makes a difficult decision to consult a psychic medium.
Which is huge for him because Bill is inherently an intense skeptic regarding mediums.
He is. But this specific individual had consistently broken through his skepticism with verifiable accuracy in previous cases.
If I were in Bill's position, I would assume the absolute worst. I would be terrified that I had inadvertently invited a malicious, demonic entity to attach itself to my life.
I think anyone would. The sensitive, however, listens to the compiled audio forensics and provides a psychological and spiritual diagnostic that completely shifts Bill's 13-year paradigm.
She tells him point blank, "This isn't a demon. It's not a malicious stalker. It is one of your own spirit guides."
A spirit guide.
That completely reframes the entire phenomenon.
She elaborates that this entity is desperately attempting to communicate a much larger, highly complex concept from the other side.
But there's a problem, right?
Yes, Bill's mind is so incredibly rigid, so intensely hyper-focused on scientific methodology, logging EMF readouts, and aggressively debunking data that his own brain is acting as a subconscious firewall.
His intense reliance on logic is actively blocking the nuance of the message.
That is a profound psychological evaluation. The idea that our own skepticism can act as a literal barrier to perception.
The guide simply cannot push complex, layered communication through Bill's heavy analytical filters. Consequently, all that manages to bleed through the static of his logic is this repeated, deeply frustrated ping, "Over here! Look over here! Stop looking at the multimeter and listen to me."
The sensitive suggests that the very technological tools and skeptical mindset that make him such a phenomenal data collector are the exact barriers preventing him from experiencing the phenomena fully.
It's an incredible paradox. His tools are both his greatest asset and his biggest blinder.
They really are.
But while this attachment follows Bill personally, his wider research reveals a fascinating, undeniable pattern about specific environments. Nothing seems to trap energy quite like places of intense confinement, repetitive human trauma, and specific geology.
Let's delve into a cornerstone concept of his research. We're talking about the stone tape theory and geological batteries.
Yes, we shift our focus to the Burlington County Jail in Mount Holly, New Jersey. Designed by the renowned architect Robert Mills and completed in 1811.
It is a massive, fireproof structure constructed entirely of poured concrete, thick brick, and dense stone. It is an architectural manifestation designed explicitly for punishment, isolation, and despair.
The logistics of investigating a structure like this are just daunting. It requires the team to endure 2 full hours of exhausting physical labor just to run hundreds of feet of heavy cabling, setting up their static infrared cameras and central DVR surveillance systems.
They essentially retrofit this 19th century prison into a high-tech sensory laboratory.
And almost immediately, the environment pushes back against their presence. Bill is located down in the lower level, specifically in the men's solitary confinement area.
Which has to be the heaviest room in the building.
Oh, absolutely. It is a dead quiet space defined by massive stone walls and heavy iron bars. And suddenly, plainly with their own physical ears, they hear the distinct, unmistakable sound of a human baby crying.
From an analytical standpoint, this auditory event is a severe contextual anomaly.
How so?
Well, when investigating a 19th century men's maximum security prison, an investigator expects to capture residual acoustics corresponding to the environment.
Like heavy boots pacing on stone, or the metallic clanging of iron gates.
Exactly. Or the verbal distress of adult inmates. A crying infant in solitary confinement is an acoustic anachronism. It simply does not belong in the historical or environmental memory of that specific space.
It completely defies logical context,
Yeah.
but the jail itself is practically vibrating with raw, unseen energy. This volatility is perfectly demonstrated by the incident with the trigger object, which the team refers to as the evil monkey.
I love this part. As part of the building's current function as a museum, curators have set up life-size dioramas to depict historical inmate life. And one specific display features a highly unsettling, vintage taxidermy sock monkey.
Just naturally creepy.
Very. The investigative team decides to use this as a trigger object. They place highly sensitive electrostatic detectors directly inside the monkey's hollow eye sockets.
And what happens is wild. The electrostatic charge in the ambient atmosphere of this jail is so intensely volatile, so thick with raw, swirling energy, that the ambient static in the room actually bridges the gap and interacts with the cheap wiring of the detectors.
The immense static electricity causes the small LED lights inside the monkey's eyes to spontaneously glow a brilliant red.
It is a terrifying physical manifestation of the invisible energy swelling around them.
And this energy quickly becomes kinetic.
Yes. An investigator named Rob walks past a heavy, tripod-mounted static lockdown camera positioned in the hallway. 40 seconds later, the hallway is entirely empty.
And then?
Suddenly, the footage shows a faint, anomalous flash of light, and the heavy camera is violently shoulder-checked by an invisible force. It jerks aggressively on its mount, exactly as if a human being sprinted into it at full speed.
This sequence of events, the spontaneous generation of an electrical charge in the trigger object and the massive physical displacement of the heavy camera, perfectly illustrates the mechanics of the stone tape theory.
Break that down because it's a fascinating theory.
To comprehend this, we have to look at historic architecture through the lens of physics and geology. Consider how a classic audio cassette tape functions.
Okay, the old plastic tapes.
Right, it is a simple strip of plastic coated in iron oxide particles. An electromagnet in the recorder aligns those iron particles in specific patterns to permanently record the frequencies of your voice.
Makes sense.
Now look at the structural composition of the Burlington County Jail. It is constructed from thousands of tons of incredibly dense stone, quartz-bearing rock, and massive iron fixtures.
And quartz is special, right?
Yes, quartz is a piezoelectric material. This means it generates a measurable electrical charge when subjected to mechanical or acoustic stress.
So the theory suggests the building itself is functioning as a literal geological recording device.
Precisely. The stone tape theory hypothesizes that extreme, unrelenting human emotion, absolute terror, profound grief, sheer agony, generates a massive spike in human bioelectrical energy.
And a prison is full of that energy.
Right. When hundreds of prisoners experience this intense bioelectrical trauma over decades in a confined space, that energy acts exactly like the electromagnet in a tape recorder. It permanently alters and aligns the structural memory of the quartz and iron embedded in the walls.
The building literally absorbs and records the trauma.
Yes. And when the atmospheric conditions align perfectly, such as a high ambient electrostatic charge that can illuminate a toy monkey's eyes, that geologically recorded trauma simply hits play.
That concept is staggering. The idea that terror isn't just a memory, but something physically baked into the atomic structure of the walls around us.
It changes how you view old buildings entirely.
It does. And if a single building can act as a localized geological battery, what happens when an entire landscape functions as a power source?
That brings us to the infamous Hinsdale House in upstate New York.
The history of this property is extraordinarily dark. It's built on land steeped in indigenous legends of massacres.
And in the 1970s, the Dandy family experienced phenomena there that was so severe, including heavy objects violently flying across rooms and the disembodied sound of Gregorian chanting echoing from the surrounding woods, that they had to call for help.
They called in Father Alphonsus Trebold, a renowned parapsychology expert from St. Bonaventure University, to perform a full structural exorcism.
The historical accounts of that exorcism are just terrifying. Witnesses reported that the spiritual pushback against the religious rites was so kinetically powerful that the actual physical foundation of the house shook violently.
The actual foundation. So when Bill and his team arrive at Hinsdale years later, they realize standard equipment just won't suffice for a place this heavy.
Right, they need to go deeper.
They decide to deploy an intensely neurologically demanding sensory deprivation technique known as the Estes method.
The Estes method was pioneered in 2016 by investigators at the Stanley Hotel in Colorado. Its entire purpose is to turn a human being into a completely unfiltered organic antenna.
And the methodology is extreme.
Very extreme. One investigator acts as the receiver. They are securely blindfolded, completely eliminating their visual processing center.
Okay, so sight is gone.
Then they wear heavy, industrial-grade, noise-canceling headphones that are plugged directly into a spirit box. The spirit box is sweeping through radio frequencies at a fraction of a second, flooding their ears with a deafening bed of white noise.
So their conscious brain is deliberately starved of all environmental data and pattern recognition.
Exactly. Their only directive is to immediately shout out loud any coherent words or phrases that seem to punch through the static in their mind.
Meanwhile, the other investigators whom the blindfolded receiver absolutely cannot hear stand in the room and ask specific, highly targeted questions out loud.
The scientific goal is to see if the seemingly random words shouted by the isolated receiver form intelligent, historically accurate answers to the unheard questions. It is designed to completely eliminate confirmation bias and psychological priming.
And during their session at the Hinsdale house, the blindfolded receiver begins shouting hyper-specific, terrifyingly accurate answers regarding the home's violent past and even the intimate details of the current owner's lives.
It's incredibly unnerving when the method works that well. However, the most profound discovery Bill makes regarding Hinsdale wasn't captured through the sensory deprivation experiment.
No, it was uncovered through geological data. Bill obtains a United States Geologic Study map and overlays it with the specific property lines of the Hinsdale house.
And the data reveals an undeniable correlation.
The house sits dead center on top of a massive, naturally occurring magnetic anomaly located deep within the Earth's crust.
It is quite literally sitting on top of a supernatural fault line.
High geomagnetic fields act as a supernatural amplifier. If we operate on the hypothesis that unseen entities require immense amounts of raw energy to manipulate our physical plane, a massive geological magnetic anomaly provides an inexhaustible, constantly flowing power source.
It suggests that the natural environment heavily dictates the severity and frequency of the supernatural activity.
And understanding how hostile environments fuel these anomalies perfectly bridges us into the ultimate apocalyptic landscape.
We are talking about Centralia, Pennsylvania.
If you want to visualize what the end of the world looks like, this is the town. Since 1962, a massive, uncontrollable coal fire has been burning deep underground in the labyrinth of mine shafts beneath the city.
The immense subterranean heat has literally fractured the earth. Plumes of toxic smoke billow up continuously from deep, jagged fissures cracking through the abandoned asphalt streets.
It is a profoundly toxic, inherently dangerous environment. When Bill and his team arrive to investigate the three remaining locations that haven't been completely swallowed by the earth, St. Peter and Paul Cemetery, St. Ignatius Cemetery, and the Oddfellows Cemetery, they deploy a millimeter.
For clarity, a millimeter is a highly specialized piece of equipment designed specifically for paranormal research. It simultaneously measures AC and DC magnetic fields while also utilizing a sensitive thermistor to measure ambient temperature changes.
They place the millimeter directly on the ground near one of the smoking vents. The ground temperature reading registers at an astonishing 125.8 degrees Fahrenheit.
That is just brutal heat to be working in.
And operating in this intense heat, they capture extraordinary anomalies. At the St. Peter and Paul Cemetery, their video equipment records brilliant, anomalous streaking lights that appear to actively and intelligently maneuver through the gravestones.
They also capture a clear EVP stating, "Not my town," which carries a heavy emotional resonance given the town's complete abandonment.
But the photographic evidence Bill captures here really requires deep analysis because it truly defies logic.
Bill takes a wide photograph of the overcast, smoke-filled sky above Centralia. At first glance to the naked eye, it simply looks like an odd, dense cloud formation.
It's just a murky sky.
But Bill relies on his technical expertise to dig deeper. He inputs the image into specialized editing software and begins systematically stripping away the luminance and backlight channels from the digital file.
Layer by layer, as the blinding backlight of the overcast sky is mathematically removed, a highly structured, undeniable, solid object is revealed hovering silently in the sky above the smoke.
It is an incredible sequence of photographic forensics demonstrating that our eyes only process a fraction of the data present in our environment.
From the burning, toxic streets of Centralia, we move to a location that arguably becomes the absolute cornerstone of Bill's entire 13-year research log, the Palmyra Museum in upstate New York.
Grounding the reality of this specific location is a deeply visceral, grim historical fact. The museum sits directly on the exact site of the horrific 1964 Breeden family fire.
A tragedy which claims 7 fatalities, including a mother and 6 of her children.
During one of their extensive visits, an investigator named Sue is down in the damp, dirt floor basement. She is sifting her hands through the earth, and she unearths a literal human child's finger bone.
Discovering physical human remains instantly sets a macabre, incredibly heavy tone for the investigation. It serves as a stark reminder that they are standing on top of buried, unresolved human tragedy.
The environment at Palmyra is incredibly dense with that history.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Palmyra is a location where Bill openly wrestles with the highly controversial technology of active spirit communication, specifically the spirit box, also known as Frank's box.
Because Bill is naturally deeply logical and highly skeptical, he fundamentally distrusts the spirit box methodology.
To understand his skepticism, we must explain the mechanics of the spirit box.
The device is engineered to rapidly and continuously sweep through AM and FM radio frequencies, typically at a rate of 100 to 200 milliseconds per channel. This creates a constant, loud bed of fragmented white noise and audio snippets.
The parapsychological theory is that spirits can manipulate these raw audio fragments in real time to form coherent words.
But Bill argues brilliantly against his own peers regarding this device. He calls it a dangerous psychological trap.
He argues that due to sheer mathematical probability, if you scan thousands of live radio broadcasts simultaneously, a random fragmented word will eventually sound like a relevant answer.
He claims it is the ultimate definition of pure confirmation bias and apophenia. The human brain is an aggressive pattern recognition machine. It will subconsciously ignore 999 random, meaningless words just to focus on the one word that happens to fit the spooky narrative of the room.
I love that he's actively trying to debunk his own industry's equipment. He doesn't want to be fooled.
He demands real proof.
But then, the box fights back against his logic. Bill is sitting in the dark at a table, leaning back, feeling intensely doubtful about the noise blaring from the speaker. He decides to ask a simple, direct question. What is your name?
The rapid, sweeping static suddenly pauses, and a clear, distinct voice punches through the noise and says, Phelps.
And they are currently sitting inside the historic William Phelps General Store building.
That specific response breaches his skepticism, but his analytical mind demands further verification. A random radio broadcast might accidentally broadcast a common surname.
Right, he isn't convinced yet. So he decides to test the device with something hyper-local, something an FM radio station broadcasting 50 miles away couldn't possibly know.
Smart.
He looks down at the table in the pitch-black room and asks, "What is sitting on the table in front of me?" The box immediately spits back the word teacup, and it says it twice to ensure it is heard.
There was, in fact, an antique teacup sitting right there in front of him on the table.
The hyperspecificity of that response shatters his theory of confirmation bias. The mathematical impossibility of a sweeping radio device sequentially answering a localized, real-time visual question about an unremarkable object sitting in the dark. Well, the odds are infinitesimal.
It forces Bill to accept the uncomfortable reality that the device was successfully bridging a communication gap with an anomalous intelligence capable of observing the physical room.
And the visual anomalies they capture at Palmyra completely break the known laws of physics.
Oh, the mirror photo.
Yes. Bill takes a high-resolution photograph where he is standing directly in front of a highly reflective surface, an antique mirror. In the resulting image, you can perfectly see the reflection of the other investigators who are standing in the room behind him.
The physics of the image are clear. The light is bouncing off the other investigators, hitting the mirror, and reflecting back into the camera lens perfectly.
But Bill's reflection is entirely, inexplicably missing. He is standing right there in the physical space, blocking the camera's view of the mirror, but he casts absolutely no reflection in the glass.
It is an absolute violation of optical physics. Light cannot simply choose not to bounce off a solid object.
Faced with these cascading paradoxes that defy logical explanation, Dill leans heavily into his scientific background. He designs a brilliant behavioral and physiological double-blind experiment during a subsequent visit to Palmyra.
He wants to address a major skeptical argument. How much of the paranormal experience is simply human biology reacting negatively to invisible environmental stressors?
Medical science is clear that prolonged exposure to high electromagnetic fields (EMF) can cause acute physiological distress in humans. Symptoms include intense paranoia, chronic fatigue, auditory hallucinations, and the classic creeping feeling of being watched by an unseen presence.
So without telling a single member of his own team what he is doing, he secretly brings an EMF pump into the building.
He intentionally exposes his team to a massive 18.98 hertz EMF ghost signal, a frequency known to cause unease, to see exactly how their bodies react.
The results are immediate and dramatic. One participant suddenly becomes intensely irrationally angry, nearly starting a physical altercation over nothing.
Another investigator's core body temperature drops significantly. They start shivering uncontrollably and break out in full-body goosebumps.
Now, when I first read this section, I have to admit I pushed back hard.
Doesn't this specific experiment completely invalidate his entire 13-year endeavor? If you can artificially induce a terrifying ghost encounter by simply plugging a hidden electromagnet into a wall outlet, doesn't that prove that ghosts are just bad wiring making our brains hallucinate? Doesn't he debunk his own book?
That is a brilliant question, and it represents the exact crisis of faith Bill wrestles with during the experiment. But if we analyze the causality deeply, it doesn't invalidate the phenomena at all. It recontextualizes the medium of interaction.
So?
Consider the physics of a manifestation. If an entity or a spirit is comprised purely of raw energy, its manifestation or movement through our physical space would naturally generate a massive spike in the ambient electromagnetic field.
Ah, the field is the byproduct.
Precisely. Therefore, the biological reactions of the investigators, The sudden blinding rage, the freezing temperatures, the uncontrollable goosebumps are genuine, measurable biological symptoms of being in proximity to that supernatural energy.
The EMF experiment proves unequivocally our biological vulnerability to magnetism, but it leaves the actual source of the field, whether it is a faulty copper wire in a wall or an unseen conscious entity manipulating energy, entirely up for debate.
He successfully proved the biological symptom, but he did not disprove the supernatural source.
That is a crucial distinction. And whatever the source of the energy was at Palmyra, its capabilities were terrifying. They capture an acoustic event in the stairwell of the Phelps General Store that is so viscerally awful, they title the audio file, The Gates of Hell.
It is the distinct, layered sound of 100 men screaming and howling in absolute agony, echoing in a completely empty stairwell. The sheer acoustic power required to generate that volume of sound represents a staggering displacement of atmospheric energy.
As Bill's investigation progresses, we see a shift from these atmospheric readings to the sheer physical manipulation of the world. We enter the highly volatile realm of precognition and physicality. This brings us to Pioneer Cemetery in Pandemonium, Pennsylvania.
Pandemonium is an incredibly remote, forgotten, overgrown cemetery hidden deep in the dense Tuscarora State Forest.
2 days before they hike into the woods, Bill experiences a severe cognitive anomaly. He suffers a hyperlucid, razor-sharp prophetic dream.
He sees highly specific, undeniable geographical details. 3 distinct headstones clustered tightly together and covered in children's toys. A distinct stone tower with thick smoke billowing out of the top, and a weathered statue of an angel.
From a strict investigative standpoint, what Bill does upon waking is vital.
He performs a classic preemptive timestamp to protect his data.
He meticulously draws exactly what he saw in the dream, folds the paper, and staples it completely shut so it cannot be altered. He creates physical, verifiable evidence of a precognitive event before his mind can be contaminated by observing the actual reality of the location.
They hike miles into the dense, unforgiving woods, and the physical reality matches his dream flawlessly.
They locate a massive field stone completely surrounded by modern children's toys and coins. They find the exact stone pillar, which, due to the way atmospheric moisture interacts with the stone, looks exactly as if it has smoke billowing from it. They locate the clustered graves of the children.
His brain organically mapped the hyperspecific geography of a place his physical eyes had never seen.
And while taking daytime infrared photographs in the woods, he captures an awe-inspiring, highly dynamic image of what looks exactly like a woman in a long, flowing dress running rapidly through the forest. The angel from his dream, captured in motion.
It is at Pioneer Cemetery that Bill truly tests the boundaries of advanced technology by utilizing the Kinect camera to capture an impossible physical interaction.
The Kinect technology is complex. It casts an invisible matrix of thousands of infrared dots across a room.
He uses a time-of-flight sensor to measure how long it takes the infrared light to bounce back to the camera, allowing the software to calculate depth and actively render human skeletal joints in 3-dimensional space.
While Bill is walking through the cemetery, the investigator monitoring the Kinect feed tells him to stop immediately. The software has rendered a highly dense, skeletal stick figure standing directly in front of him on the infrared grid.
Bill reaches out his physical hands into the empty air, feeling absolutely nothing.
Then, the time-of-flight software actively tracks the invisible figure turning smoothly and scurrying off the edge of the tracking grid.
The machine's complex algorithm calculates the depth and mass of an object clearly, while the human eye perceives nothing but empty air. It forces us to ask how much of the world is entirely invisible to our biology.
Bill continues to push these boundaries with experimental physical devices. At the Red Lion Holistic Salon, he deploys a concept known as the Devil's Toy Box.
This is a terrifying theoretical tool designed to trap energy. It is a sealed cube constructed entirely of inward-facing mirrors.
The physics behind it dictate that if you place a microphone and a light source inside, the infinite visual and acoustic reflections create an endless feedback loop.
It acts as a localized containment field, theoretically trapping the bioenergy of the spirit in an infinite loop.
The resulting audio captured from inside the box defies standard acoustics. It sounds bizarrely metallic, compressed, and warped, as if the audio frequencies are literally trapped and degrading inside a tin can.
But the most violent, undeniable physical manipulations occur at Poasttown Elementary in Middletown, Ohio.
It is a sprawling, terrifyingly empty 1937 schoolhouse with a dark history tied to 2 horrific local train accidents.
In the massive, empty gymnasium in broad daylight, Bill sets up a static camera monitoring a sagging, deeply sunken wheelchair with a heavy basketball resting securely in the seat.
Upon reviewing the footage later, the heavy basketball physically pushes itself up and out of the deep indentation of the wheelchair seat and rolls aggressively across the gym floor.
The physics required to achieve that are undeniable. It requires a substantial exertion of kinetic force to push a heavy spherical object out of a deep depression against the pull of gravity.
And the physical activity continues aggressively on the third floor. The team hears a loud metallic rattling echoing down the empty hall.
Bill places a specialized device equipped with a vibration sensor, which utilizes MEMS chips to measure Coriola's force and acceleration inside a metal school locker.
The audio recorder clearly captures the heavy metal lockers violently rattling, and the vibration sensors simultaneously light up, confirming a massive physical disturbance and acceleration with zero human presence in the hallway.
They also capture the clear, echoing, multi-layered sound of a phantom choir singing in the empty gymnasium.
Even in smaller environments, like a quiet log cabin in Dover, Pennsylvania, the physicality is undeniable. A static camera set up in an empty attic catches a clear reflection of a solid person walking deliberately past a mirror.
Downstairs, the audio recorder captures the distinct physical sound of plastic candy wrappers crinkling on their own inside a dish on a table.
The invisible world is constantly violently bleeding into the physical one. But analyzing all this data, the kinetic force, the optical anomalies, brings it to the emotional climax of the deep dive.
We shift from cold data collection to the profound humanity of the spirits. We must discuss the weight of the soul.
We travel to the Selma Mansion in Northtown, Pennsylvania. It is a massive, historic estate built in 1794.
The evidence collected here interacts directly with the physical space, but it carries a staggering emotional weight that redefines the purpose of the investigations.
Bill takes a high-resolution photograph of a completely undisturbed, thickly dusty wooden floor in a closed-off room. Hours later, without anyone entering the space, he takes another photo of the exact same spot.
Imprinted perfectly and clearly in the thick dust is the freshly pressed bare footprint of a small child.
Someone or something is walking through the dust, leaving a physical impression. But the absolute heartbreak of the investigation happens down in the pitch-black basement.
A group of investigators are sitting in folding chairs, completely submerged in darkness, conducting an EVP session. One woman sharply gasps and states out loud that she just felt invisible human fingers gently brush through her hair.
The digital audio recorder, which is running on the concrete floor right between their chairs, picks up a voice responding directly to her gasp. It's an old man's voice.
It is incredibly raspy, exhausted, and deeply sad. He says clearly, "I'm pretty sure I went home."
This raises an important question about the fundamental nature of the afterlife and the true purpose of paranormal investigation.
If we deeply analyze the linguistic and emotional content of that specific EVP, it is profoundly melancholy. It paints a tragic existential picture of a human consciousness suffering from what we might call residual spiritual dementia.
He is trapped in a cold, dark basement, genuinely unsure if he ever actually crossed over or found peace. It violently shifts the narrative from an adrenaline-fueled scientific data collection mission to a heartbreaking human tragedy.
Bill's mission is revealed as an act of deep empathy. He isn't just hunting ghosts. He is trying to offer comfort and acknowledgement to the confused dead.
It fundamentally changes how you view the phenomena and makes you want to reach into the dark and help them find their way.
All of these complex threads, the prophetic dreams, the terrifying EMF manipulation, the profound sadness of trapped spirits, the advanced technology mapping the invisible, it all culminates in one final, massively active location.
The grand finale of Bill's career. The Wildwood Sanitarium in Salamanca, New York.
Wildwood is an imposing Gothic structure originally built in 1900. It transitioned from an osteopathic clinic into a tuberculosis sanitarium in 1923, bearing witness to an immense influx of suffering, isolation, and death.
Uniquely, it features a full-length, decaying wooden bowling alley in the damp basement, adding a surreal element to the architecture. It serves as the ultimate, unforgiving testing ground for every single piece of equipment and psychological methodology Bill has honed over 13 years.
The escalation at Wildwood is immediate. Inexplicable bangs echo through the house, so kinetically powerful they trigger the X, Y, and Z axes on Bill's gyroscopes.
Gyroscopes measure rotational motion and orientation, meaning the structural impacts were powerful enough to physically shake the devices across 3 dimensions.
The Kinect camera, monitoring the grand sweeping wooden staircase, captures another mathematical impossibility.
It fully renders a disembodied lower torso, a set of invisible legs, walking deliberately down 2 steps, pausing as if observing the investigators below, and then slowly backing up the stairs and vanishing from the time of flight sensor.
And then the activity concentrates in the dull room, arguably the most unsettling room in the entire sanitarium.
Before the session begins, an investigator discovers a completely dead, heavily corroded electronic ball toy. The batteries are missing, the internal wiring is ruined by moisture, it is mechanically, fundamentally non-functional. They leave it sitting in the center of the wooden floor.
During the dead silent EVP session, the mechanical failure of the toy spontaneously reverses itself.
The broken electronic ball suddenly illuminates brightly, powers on completely by itself, flashes its LED lights, plays a tinny music track, and then physically rolls 5 feet across the floor.
And crucially, it doesn't just roll aimlessly due to an uneven floor. It rolls intentionally away from the investigators, retreating deep into a dark corner to hide.
The exertion of energy to power a dead circuit and create kinetic motion is an absolute flex by whatever intelligence is dominating that room.
But the crowning piece of evidence at Wildwood, the singular moment that defines the entire 13-year logbook, happens right in front of Bill's physical eyes. It is a physical, undeniable, visual manifestation of atmospheric displacement.
Bill and his partner are walking down a mundane hallway. Bill has his infrared video camera rolling. Right in the middle of a sentence, he stops dead.
With his naked physical eyes, he watches as a thick, swirling, heavy column of smoke physically detaches itself from the shadows on the wall and passes deliberately between him and his partner.
His partner misses it in real time, but they rewind the digital tape in the dark, and the IR camera captured it perfectly. A dense anomaly moving with undeniable purpose, blocking the infrared light.
It is the ultimate collision of advanced technology capturing the exact reality that the human eye often refuses to acknowledge.
So, what does this all mean? When we synthesize this incredible 13-year journey, what are we left with? In the final pages of Uncharted Realms, Bill reveals something incredibly bittersweet.
This is his final book. He is officially retiring from the darkness.
He acknowledges a profound philosophical truth. He may never find definitive, empirical, laboratory-grade answers. He never found the undeniable ghost in a jar.
But he proved unequivocally that our physical reality is incredibly porous. The gadgets, the EMF meters, the time of flight connects, the multimeters measuring chemical battery drain, they do not create the phenomena.
They simply allow our rigid scientific brains to squint hard enough to see the edges of the anomaly. They successfully map the footprint of the anomaly, proving that something is displacing the atmosphere around us.
The journey itself becomes the ultimate evidence. He spent over a decade as a quiet observer, a dedicated listener, shielding the terrified living and comforting the forgotten dead.
And his work leaves us with one final, deeply provocative thought. Think about the environments we've explored today. If the heavy, quartz-filled stone walls of a 19th century jail can act like a massive geological tape recorder, absorbing the terror of its inmates.
And if a single, dusty wooden step in a historic mansion can absorb the profound sadness of an old man.
What is the room you're sitting in right now recording about you? When you finally stand up, turn off the lights, and walk away, what kind of echo are you leaving behind in the dark?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the unknown.